Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Rosenthal, and I work with the Reuben Mark Initiative for Organizational Character and Leadership at Columbia Business School. I'm excited to welcome you to today's Organizational Leadership Series featuring Danny Boockvar. Am I saying it right? Boockvar. President of 5 Iron Golf. This series is a featured program of the Reuben Mark Initiative, which teaches the leadership skills to achieve optimal organizational cultures. Reuben Mark is, the former CEO and chairman of Colgate-Palmolive, and we're grateful for his support. Now I'm thrilled to introduce our moderator today, Chuck Dodge, second year CBS student and member of the CBS Golf Club, which, by the way, has made plenty of visits to 5 Iron in recent years. Prior to CBS, Chuck spent 7 years in the financial services industry, including roles with Stifel, Carta, and after graduation, Chuck will be joining McKinsey & Company. But very important for today, Chuck is a lifelong lover of golf and has coached young people as a volunteer instructor at the First Tee Foundation of Connecticut. One last announcement before passing it over to Chuck. For those who stay until the end of the event and have signed in, you will receive a free 30-minute session at any 5 Iron Golf location in New York City. A huge thank you to Danny for this awesome surprise. All right. Over to you, Chuck.
I grabbed everyone. Thank you, Tracy. So I'm thrilled to introduce our speaker today, Danny Boockvar. If you, like me, are a consumer of simulator golf, American football, Thin Mints, or several other wonderful products, there's a good chance that Danny is partly responsible for that experience. Danny is a growth-focused consumer executive with 20 years of experience leading fast-scaling multi-channel brands in the United States and abroad, including the NFL, New York Cruise Lines, the Girl Scouts of America, and Weight Watchers. He's currently president of 5 Iron Golf, the world's leading indoor golf and entertainment platform with more than 40 locations globally, backed by investors including Callaway and Danny Meyer. Prior to 5 Iron, Danny served as the president of Thrasio, a billion-dollar global digital consumer goods company. Known for building high-performing teams and award-winning workplace cultures, earning multiple Best Places to Work accolades, he has also worked extensively with leading private equity firms across North America, Europe, and Asia, bringing a rare combination of consumer intuition, operational rigor, and leadership at scale. We're very excited to have you today. So everyone, please, again, welcome Danny.
Thank you.
So just to kind of set the stage for the audience, we'll save 10 minutes at the end of the session for Q&A if you do have questions. With that, to get us started, maybe we can spend another minute on your background. And so as business school students, we're really interested in how careers take shape. And I was wondering if you maybe could walk us through your early career story and how that led to the C-suite at some of these iconic consumer brands.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here. All right, raise your hand if you love golf. Raise your hand if you love golf but suck at it. Okay, me too. Well, I welcome seeing you all at 5 Iron after this. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you, Tracy, for the invite. Thank you to my wife, Lori, who met, who's also at Columbia Business School in the career office. So she's actually the most qualified person in the Boockvar family. So visit her for career advice. Visit me for golf advice. And one last question. Any lawyers in the room? No. All right, I'm the only one. So I am a lawyer who went to Penn undergrad. That's where I met Lori. And then I went to Penn Law School, and I thought I would be a lawyer. And one thing I did in 1999 was throw away a good law degree and a job at Simpson Thacher and Bartlett to go take a risk and join an internet business in 1999. And it was probably the biggest risk I ever took. And if I actually tell you the name of the company, You will laugh, but it's a good start to this very zigzaggy career that I've had. The company's name was, wait for it, craftshop.com. And it was the first ever arts and crafts supply company to sell direct to consumers online. So I went to Penn and then Penn Law School, and then I got a job at Simpson Thacher and Bartlett, and I left it to go to a startup called Craft Shop when I was 29. And both Lori and my mom thought I had committed career suicide. And it was the best decision I ever made. We were bankrupt in 6 months. Still the best decision I ever made. So what you're going to hear is a career that is not linear, not for the faint of heart, a lot of fun. But I went from a high prestige place, should sound familiar, to something that was non-traditional, but I thought a better fit for my skills and interest. And, one thing led to another where Craft Shop didn't work out, but if you've heard of some VC firms like Benchmark, they were an investor. CMGI at the time was a big investor, and I impressed them enough that they put me into their next internet business. And before I knew it, I had moved from from legal to sales and business development. And that was the beginning of my MBA, because I never went to Columbia Business School. But it was a really formative start to what was, I thought, the only path for me, which was the high prestige sort of Ivy League path. I'm here to tell you there is another path. There's ups and downs, but there's certainly another path. From there, I spent 2 years doing sales and biz dev in probably the biggest internet boom since or before where we are now with AI. So it's a very similar time where lots of energy, lots of jobs, and lots of froth. I hope not too much froth, but I rode that into a new career path. It worked for me. After 2 years of that, I really was at an inflection point where I said, am I a sales and biz dev guy who can sell software, or am I a lawyer? And that's not a very normal cognitive dissonance. So my career advisor and therapist and I met and talked about, the options, and I decided I would kind of look for what I thought, again, prestige jobs for 29-year-olds look like when you come out of Penn or Columbia. I was like, I'm going to go work for the NBA in biz dev. David Stern's a lawyer, that's what lawyers should do. Where I went? I didn't go to the NBA. I didn't go to AOL Time Warner, which was like the buzziest place in 1999, 2000. I went to Weight Watchers. Like, I'm a skinny dude. Like, it was not normal in the sense of where people thought my career path would go. But let me tell you why I went to Weight Watchers. I got a call from a partner at Simpson Thacher and said, we work for a private equity firm called the Invest Group. They're former BCG guys, really smart. They just took Keebler Foods public. They just bought Weight Watchers from the Heinz Frozen Food Company in a leveraged buyout, and they're going to professionalize the business and take it public. And we need an assistant general counsel with good business vibes, and we think you'd fit in. And I said, there's no effing way I'm going to go work at Weight Watchers. I got to go to the NBA. That's what people like me should do. And I went to Weight Watchers for 11 years. It was the best career move I ever made. Within 2 years, I got lucky. A woman who was the CEO said, hey, Danny, why don't you run one of our regions for Weight Watchers? I've been, I'm 99 pounds wet. I don't, it wasn't something that felt like I could manage the East region of Weight Watchers, which is effectively 7,000 women who are the management team and employees, all of whom had previous weight challenges and had success overcoming their weight loss. And I was their boss. I was 32 years old, and all I had in common was that I cry at Grey's Anatomy. and I still do. And it was the best job decision I ever made. So I'll stop because, you know, I can go on, but there's paths for those who don't do the normal, if you will. And I kind of ended up in jobs that I'm finally, you know, a little better fit, golf, and I worked at the NFL. But in those early days, it was not for the faint of heart, but I felt like it was a better fit. And I'll stop after Weight Watchers. But 10 years there, we took it public. We launched their digital business for the first time. Stock went from 20 to 90. We opened up in China, Mexico, all of continental Europe, a mix of publishing, licensing, franchising, food. It was the most incredibly diverse business, you know, and a great place for me to spend my 30s. And from there, it's been a story of consumer brands or consumer service businesses, and I've been very, very grateful.
That's great. And so you've mentioned a couple influential people and firms that shaped your story a little bit. I guess, would you point to any role models or mentors that encouraged you to take some of these career risks as you navigated your way through?
Yeah, two come to mind, and I'll say Lori just because she'll yell at me at dinner if I don't. Other than Lori, the career advisor. So Linda Hewitt was the CEO of Weight Watchers. Again, I was 29 years old and a lawyer, and she said, hey, you should be the regional director of the East region overseeing 7,000 people. I was like, I've never managed a person. So the ability for her to have that faith in me was unbelievable. And I had worked, you know, I had spent 2 years. We stayed up late. I did a bunch of M&A with her, and she gave me a shot. That was just very lucky. The other is I have an identical twin brother. He is a neurosurgeon. If you haven't watched the show Lenox Hill, he's in it. And so he is a neurosurgeon who's now a Netflix star who makes a lot of money, and he makes me feel woefully insecure. So I have to deal with that every day. So those two people plus Lori are sort of the key that shaped me.
No, that's helpful. So I think one thing that jumps out on your resume is how you've moved around a fair number of industries in, you know, sports, consumer brands, lifestyle, et cetera. I guess, you know, what was it maybe that drove you to try some of these different things? And have there been any common threads that help you lead in such different settings?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, my one piece of advice is it's very hard to craft a nonlinear career until you sort of have the choices that you make. For me, it was 10 years of Weight Watchers, which was an incredible experience. I thought it was going in a direction after 10 great years that maybe would be challenging. It turned out to be right. You know, we always worried in a good way about GLP-1s, but they finally came. And I really wanted to run something smaller. Weight Watchers at the time was $2 billion in sales. We were public. We had 20,000 employees. You know, it was a big company when I left. So I left that and I became CEO of the Circle Line Sightseeing on the West Side. $40 million business, 50 years old. I ran sightseeing and restaurants and a water commuting business, singularly headquartered in Manhattan. It was the smallest business I had ever run and the most fulfilling. Because I really wanted to, I wanted to be CEO. I only made it to COO of Weight Watchers. And I really wanted to run something small. And they gave me a chance that I was probably unqualified for. And I did that for a couple of years. So I really liked tour and travel. One of the things I realized was I do cry at Grey's Anatomy, and I think my EQ is high. So I connected well with Weight Watchers, but it's not exactly like a fun job. And I realized that my hedonism scores are pretty high. Lori gives me like a Myers-Briggs every 2 years. So my hedonism or DISC or whatever she gave me showed like, okay, this is why I wasn't a great lawyer either. I'm not risk averse, and I like to have fun. Okay, so tour and travel felt like a good fit. After 3 years of that, the NFL called, and they wanted somebody to help launch the first ever indoor theme park for the NFL in a joint venture with Cirque du Soleil, the NFL, and TPG. And I was like, this is finally, I got the cool job. Like, I made it, you know. But that was after I was 40 something. But it was a really, it was a no-brainer, obviously, to go work there. And so I did tour, travel, and sports for 5 years. The NFL experience, which I opened in Times Square, did not work out. COVID and a bunch of other things made it an expensive but unsuccessful business model. And that's going to be another thing. If you're interested in running businesses, more fail than succeed. And if you want to be an executive, you're going to have to work, live with ups and downs. So that, was an easy decision, but those 5 years were really great. And I was really sad when the NFL experience didn't turn out. It turned out that around that time, a guy who, remember I mentioned Craft Shop, the company that I joined in 1999? Well, in 2019, 20 years later, the junior analyst I had worked with at Craft Shop founded a company called Thrasio. And I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of Thrasio, but it was, in 2019, the first of an Amazon roll-up business. And a guy who I had known for 20 years and had breakfast once a year for 20 years called me or emailed me, and the email, I'll never forget it, said, "President dude?" ? And it was him and his co-founder saying, "Hey, we need a president because we've actually never run anything, but we founded this Amazon roll-up business. We need a president dude. Would you be it?" And I looked, and this is 2019, because everybody know what happened in March of 2020? The timing was pretty good. I joined an Amazon business that for 5 years was one of the fastest growing business in history. We rode, and I, again, was woefully unqualified to run an e-commerce or a consumer product business. So that one I was insecure about because I was a consumer service person, not a consumer products person. But what they needed was someone who helped build organizational muscle, and I had seen enough of big companies, small companies, public companies, private companies in the US, overseas. So that worked out. So there's no, it's not like I said, I want to do consumer products right before COVID. I got lucky. So you got to just be willing. Actually, the one message you all should remember, you're meeting people you will work with in 20 years. You don't know that yet. Keep having breakfast, keep having cocktails, keep having coffee. If there's one thing you leave with tonight, that is the reason I've had a good career. Not a great career, a good career. I'm still not as famous or rich as my twin brother.
Should we switch gears a little bit and talk about 5-Iron? Perfect. So 5-Iron now has over 40 locations across 20 states and multiple countries, with more in development. Can you share maybe some stats or memories about the growth of the business in recent years? And would love to hear as well kind of what you expect going forward from here.
So I joined 5-Iron when I left Thrasio, and I really was looking for, wait for this, because this is when you set your sights and it's hard. I was like, all right, I'm like a mid-cap consumer guy. So I'm going to do a mid-cap, high-growth consumer business that has good backing, good tailwinds, good product market fit, and is headquartered in Manhattan. Like, there's not a lot, that's not really super techy. Like, I said, you know what, it's going to be a couple of years till I have another job if I really do this. But that was what I hoped for. So I downloaded everyone and their mother from LinkedIn, created a spreadsheet of coffee talks and chit chats, and went about spending about a year and a half before I left Thrasio, a year and a half warming up my network, a year and a half before I wanted to leave, I started to have coffee talks and reach outs. And I met a guy named John Canarak from North Castle, who may actually even be a Columbia. I don't know if he's a Columbia guy. He may be. So North Castle Partners was a venture and growth equity firm that had done Therabody, Barry's Boot Camp, Zumba in the day. So I had known him through my health and wellness. We went to the Smith in Flatiron, and it was one of those like, holy cow, you're available. The founder of Five Iron is could really use a partner to help him scale the business. And it is a mid-cap, high growth consumer business with good tailwinds, good product market fit, good cap table, headquartered in New York. And I said, wow, that's incredible. And so I met Jared the next week. I had the job the week after. And that's the fun part. When it's a small company, things can happen fast. I took, you'd be horrified about, and I don't want to get too personal, but it's important if you want to emulate a career path like mine, you better know how much money you need to live. Because one of the things that we've done is realize that cash is one thing, equity is another. And if you can know what your risk profile is, there's a lot of jobs that don't pay great cash that are great jobs, and there's upside in the equity. And so that's why I got this job. I was willing to take a small mid-cap salary and a small mid-cap job and a big chunk of equity. And I hoped that the company was going to keep growing and I could add a lot of value. And, who's been to a Five Iron lately? And who thinks Five Iron's doing a pretty good job? No bull. Right? Good product market fit in an industry that keeps growing, and every new store we open just keeps doing better than I expected. So it's been a real gift, and I'm about 2 years in, and I'm really happy that the bet I took seems like it's paying off.
And are you able to share at all about maybe like the next stage of the business, what you're envisioning from here?
What we do is, and one of the things I do, because I've been to more companies than many of the founding team, is I help do the strategic planning. Not in like a bureaucratic big company way, but at least we have, here's what our core business is, and here's what our growth flywheels should be. And here's what, if you're a private equity firm, and you probably all have worked at some, or a growth equity firm, they're going to come up with a value creation plan, and we might as well do our own and map a path to take over the world. And so our core business is what you see. It's 40 stores now, 40 more on the way. It's in the U.S. and around the world. And it's really exciting. And that business in and of itself, which is a mix of company-owned and franchise, could be really exciting. What we've layered onto that is interesting tech, where if you've been to Five Iron lately, you can start to wager in the Sims. So think FanDuel meets Five Iron. And so you can be like, I bet you can't hit the pen and bet $50 like we all do on green grass when we play. Everybody's betting their buddies, and we've started to layer that in. So that's a really interesting place to be. We're moving into the at-home, like at casino, at hotel, sort of mobile sim business. So that brings the brand on the road, and that could be interesting. But honestly, right now, it's all about just continuing with the core.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So this is the organizational leadership series, and I think it's important that we talk about the culture of your organization. So maybe you could fill us in on what the Five Iron culture is like, and maybe a different way of looking at it is how much of that has been kind of intentional and designed versus just naturally occurred over the development of the business.
Yeah, it's always hard to judge a culture from the outside. Like, to be honest, you can go on Glassdoor, you're not going to really know much. You can meet a founder in an interview, a couple interviews. It's hard. But I had a hunch that this one, being founder-led, pretty young management team. You know, we're only 50 people in corporate. It's like a nice size and the kind of place I like to be. And honestly, even a mix of Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. So when I got there, I knew it would be founder-led, and that is certainly something to look at, and get to know a founder because, founders are certain types. And I know that I can get along well with the intensity, some would say narcissism of many founders, but that's what makes them so good. I am not that. So, getting to know Jared and seeing the culture that he had built, I got comfortable that it was my kind of vibe. 5-iron, I mean, like if you go to a 5-iron, like there's a neon sign that says, find your balls. So it's that kind of irreverent place, It's got an energy that is a bit irreverent. It's got a sense of humor. It's urban. And I assume that the culture of the company would follow the culture of the brand, and it does. So that I wanted because, like, life is short. When I interview people, I often say, and I hope I haven't offended anybody here, but I always say to somebody, if you're going to work at 5-iron, prepare to be offended. Like we joke, you'll probably be offended. So that sense of humor, that irreverence, there's an energy and a fast pace, lack of bureaucracy. That's what I try to bring to the companies. And you have to be intentional about it. Like 50 people, 100 people. We have 2,000 people, maybe even 3 now in the field. But when I was at Thrasio, and if you haven't studied Thrasio, that's also an interesting case study. I joined when we were 30 people. I left when we were 2,000. And there's an anthropologic principle called the Dunbar principle that at 150 people, humans and their loyalty starts to change. And your loyalty, from 0 to 150 is all about each other. That's a small enough community. At 150, weird things start happening. So at companies, you start becoming loyal to like the marketing group because they're 150 or the finance group. So loyalties start to get complicated as you scale. So I was very sensitive, even at 5-iron, and intentional about making sure we over-communicate. The Dunbar principle is wired in all of us. Our loyalties as we get bigger, bureaucracies happen, loyalties change, but you can be super intentional about it. And as I do with Jared and the team is drive a lot of, and you can remember these 3 Ps because it's the only way I do. We have to know what 5-iron's purpose is. We have to praise and celebrate, and we have to have places where all of you can reach your potential. And if I get purpose, praise, and potential right, it's hard to get the culture wrong, except there's one other thing that you should look for, and that's that the senior leadership team is not a cluster. If the senior leadership team is a cluster, the place is going to be terrible to work at. And so one of my jobs is to make sure that the senior leadership team, in addition to the 3 Ps, if you will, like gets along. And if you do all that, we'll scale and still be a fun place to work.
That's awesome. And so I think that speaks a lot to maybe how, culture can change, working at smaller versus larger company, more steady growth versus hyper growth. Are there any other kind of like leadership priorities changing that you can point to, from like point A to point B, big company, small company, slower versus faster growth?
Yeah. The about the founder and the founding team, those early, people who have been there in the early years, they're good athletes who do a lot of things. As you get bigger, you need to specialize a little bit. So we're in that process now of scaling without slowing down, particularly as you roll out franchisees around the world. I was lucky enough to go to Saudi Arabia last week. Like, whoever thought that 5-iron would be opening in Riyadh? It's incredible. We're at the bottom of the building the Sovereign Wealth Fund built in the middle of the desert, and it's going to be great. But the founding team doesn't know how to run a 5-iron in Saudi Arabia. Like, you need to build systems for that. And that's where we are now, which is, how do I take all of what we did for the first 5 years, bottle it up, create, organizational muscle so that a team run by Golf Saudi could take the 5-irons, special sauce, and then roll it out to Riyadh and Jeddah. We were launching in Qatar, and we're open in Dubai. Like, these are places that, are incredibly different than where we are. But we're very excited. So that's our next challenge.
And you mentioned that special sauce. Maybe you can expand on that a little bit, sort of what that entails for 5-iron.
Again, you all have, many of you have been. I like to joke, like, if you're a good golfer, you take it seriously as a place to get better. And if you want an espresso martini, we got a really good one. Like, there's not many places that do both. And our cap table is made up of Northcastle, Callaway, and Danny Meyer. So it makes sense. We should make a good espresso martini and be good at golf. And that's kind of it. We're one of the few places that do both well. And I joined, so you know, not because, even though I love a good espresso martini, I remember I made Lori come with me on a Saturday. I'm like, I'm interviewing at this place. We got to do some diligence. Saturday afternoon, she's like, I'm going to go play golf. Yes, you're going to go to Herald Square. And it was the best espresso martini I ever had. But I didn't join for that. I joined because it was a real sport. And what 5-iron, over half the business now is a membership business that's recur, repeat business, high word of mouth, high retention, lifetime value, with over 100 pros, PGA pros, with a fittings business. So, food and beverage is good, events are good, and espresso martinis are good. But kind of everyone can do that. Doing a real sport that's not going away was what I thought 5-iron did really well, and it's been really fun to have a business that's still split 50-50 between social and golf.
Oh, terrific. And maybe one more kind of like formal question. In a slightly different vein, could you maybe close out the conversation with one piece of business advice and one piece of personal advice for everybody in the room?
Business advice, network, always be networking. 20 years I wouldn't have gotten the job. So that one, take risk. Don't be worried about your Ivy League degree, and take your risk. That sounds cliche, but you'll come back and eventually have a cool job like I did. But my cocktail party chatter took a hit for a couple of years. Don't worry about the cocktail party chatter. Networking, that, and take risks. Those are some of the, everyone says, oh, find a mentor. Like, I honestly really haven't had a mentor. I had someone who took a bet on me early, but unlike my twin brother, which is interesting because he's had a partner and a mentor for 20 years, I'm very jealous. I haven't had that. That's hard, but you kind of just got to luck it out, or if you get one. And then the second piece is a personal one. Honestly, like, I hope you find networking fun and social, because if you can get energy from meeting people, it's going to really help your career. So that just works for me because I love meeting people. So socially and personally, that's good. It's helped my career a lot.
Well, thank you. And maybe before we turn it over to Q&A, would you mind if we did a quick fire round related to kind of like some golf related questions? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So
Don't fail.
I have roughly 10 questions, and let's see if we can knock them out in 60 seconds or so. Does that sound good? No, unless you want me to. Okay. Perfect. First one, favorite golf course that you've played in real life?
Riyadh Country Club last week.
Nice. How about favorite golf course on the simulator?
It's hard not to say Bethpage Black.
Any hole-in-ones so far?
None. Not even close.
Morning tee time or twilight round?
Twilight. We played night golf in Riyadh last week. It was insane.
Music on the range, yes or no?
Yes.
Music on the golf course, yes or no?
Yes.
Favorite player between the two, and you have to pick one. Rory or Bryson?
Bryson.
Okay, same question. Nelly Korda or Lydia Ko?
Nelly Korda.
Ryder Cup or Super Bowl?
Super Bowl. Although it's a tough one.
2026 Masters pick.
Oh, that's a good one. Who's yours?
I think you got to go with Scotty, but that's just me.
After this week, he wasn't so great.
We'll see. I think he'll turn it around.
Yeah.
What's yours?
I'll go with Scotty's not a bad pick.
Hottest take on the future of golf?
Look, indoor golf is for real. Like, it is and I did not know this before I joined 5-Iron. And I had to play a Pro-Am last week. I haven't played 18 holes of golf very much since I was 20. And I had to play a Pro-Am with Martin Kamer, who's the former number one. And what did I do? I went to 5-Iron every week, once a week, for 30 minutes and practiced, which you'd think, no duh, you work at 5-Iron, but it's hard to get out and actually do that. But ever since Thanksgiving, I made sure I did not want to embarrass myself. I'm like a 28 handicap. I will, if I shoot 100, it's lucky. So I was really nervous. Going to 5-Iron and practicing is the only way to getting better as possible inside. And then I played much better outside. So that crossover between indoor and outdoor golf is for real.
I think that's a good note to end on before we turn it over. Can we maybe do a quick round of applause for Danny? And I think we have some microphones in the room. We'll do Q&A. And do you want to pick people out or? Oh, you perfect. Okay, great.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. This was a really interesting conversation. I had a question about the businesses that you're rolling out in Qatar and Dubai and Riyadh, and what the strategy and intention was behind those rollouts, and maybe what are some of the risks and challenges, but also the upside that you see with that expansion.
I mean, and I bet Jared would answer this, the founder and CEO, we were opportunistic. We knew somebody in Dubai who was a member in our original Flatiron location. So he said, I want to try this in Dubai. I think it's going to work. We said, well, we're kind of a winter place. We're better in cold weather. He said, don't worry, it gets hot, and there's a lot of expats, and I think it'll be great. He then built a 17-simulator, 3-story behemoth in downtown Dubai and raised his own private equity. It's our single best location in the world. We did not have to put up any CapEx, and I'm getting almost $500,000 of royalty fees. And the brand execution's been incredible. So then when somebody raised their hand and said, I want to do that in Qatar, and Gulf Saudi called us, Gulf Saudi, who also owns Live, called us and said, we want to be your franchisee in Saudi because we like what we saw in Dubai. I think it's a combination of luck and a good product. And now we really see it. So whether it's India, certainly Korea, and all of continental Europe, we've now almost franchised all of continental Europe other than Germany. Not open yet, but franchising, for those, may not be so obvious. What you do with the franchise, you don't have to put up the capital. They move faster. They do all the build out and the work. They just have to comply with our program. And together, that's a beautiful business if you can get that to work. We got that to work in Dubai, and it's paying off really nicely. And for the finance nerds in the room, which I'm assuming many are, the multiple on franchises is even better than the multiple on a core wholly owned business. So we may get 15 times for our core multiple, but we'll get 20 to 25 for the EBITDA from a franchise. So it's a great business if they don't screw it up.
Hey, Danny, thanks for coming in. My question is around other sports. I'm a big golf fan, but have you thought about expanding into other sports, either using the simulators or anything similar at 5-iron?
Definitely. We accidentally got into bowling in one location. True story. A landlord brought us in Detroit into a hotel, and he wanted indoor golf, but he also wanted any Midwesterners here. Anyone ever tried duck pin bowling? Right? It's kind of fun. It's like the pickleball of bowling. So we have a duck pin bowling place. We thought it was going to be a random thing. It actually did really well. Detroit's one of our best locations. Why? Because the event business, Goldman Sachs or McKinsey, wants to do a holiday party. They're like, well, not everybody golfs. Don't worry. We have duck pin bowling. So we ended up adding a bunch of duck pin bowling lanes to almost every location. So if you go to Rockefeller Center, it's 15 sims. All those sims, by the way, play golf and other sports. You can do soccer kicks. You can do football throws. You can do dodgeball. And you could also do a little bowling. In Coral Gables, we're opening... There's a firm called Pinstripes, which is a pretty big bowling concept that's going bankrupt. We took over a failed Pinstripes. We're going to use the same brand we launched in Detroit called Strike Club as our first full-scale bowling alley. Whether bowling, it's just it's close enough. I can manage both. It helps on the event business. That's real life. We're always looking at, there's some interesting indoor tennis concepts where you can hit a sim. We've looked at baseball. I think there are a lot of folks who are trying to become the 5-iron of fill in the blank. We haven't seen anything yet. We will do mini golf in Coral Gables. And in Shaker Heights, Cleveland, we have a golf sim, a strike club bowling, and we'll do outdoor mini golf. So that'll be more of a family entertainment center concept. But again, first the serious golfer, then the family entertainment. We'll see.
Hi, Denny. 30 handicap here, so I appreciate your transparency earlier.
Come visit. You could drop 5 strokes, trust me.
I'll use the free lesson for sure. My question is around TGL. And so indoor golf it's a bullish signal for you all, except viewership is quite down. So I'm curious how you view indoor and sim golf as recreation versus entertainment and media, and how maybe those converge over time.
Yeah, TGL was a good thing for us last year. And I think generally that it wasn't so embarrassing, and serious golfers embraced it. So that was a tailwind last year. This year it's less viewership, but still it's not a total embarrassment that indoor golf isn't good. It just maybe not getting the same ratings. So we were happy about TGL. It took indoor golf seriously. For those of you who don't know TGL, it's this huge arena in Orlando. They drive into a sim, and then they have a short game into a real green. It's real pros. There's real investment behind it. So that was a net positive, and gave us credibility. So we're pretty excited about it. And I think, again, the general consensus is that indoor golf is real, and there are now more indoor golfers than there are outdoor golfers.
Perfect. Yeah, last question.
Thanks again, Danny. I'm just curious your take on 5-iron golf as like a global brand, since I think like public and private golf in the United States is very different than it is around the world, just with the United States being very expensive and more exclusive in some places. So I'd like to hear how kind of you think about attracting customers from the US and globally too.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the answer yet, but we just went to London. And I left London saying, 5-iron is going to kill it here. Like, it is dense, urban, bad weather, hard to play golf, lots of finance bros and gals. Like, it's going to, Fortune 1000 events. It should be incredible. I left Riyadh saying the same thing. Now, there's no alcohol in Riyadh, so no espresso martinis, but maybe we'll do smoothies. So we're learning, but Dubai is doing great under our brand. We're going to launch Madrid this year. We've signed France. We're opening in Stockholm. Like, it just seems to cross over with the 5 Iron brand and with our core set of products and services. But we'll localize along the way as we have to. But to be honest, right now, we haven't really had to localize that much, which is pretty interesting. You know, I launched Weight Watchers in China. Now, that was an experience, right? Like, localizing a food group education business at scale in Shanghai was very different than in New York. But at the fundamental level, once we sort of got to the first principles of the product and service, it was actually remarkably similar. And I have a hunch it's going to be the same for us. But we're in the early days.
Thanks, Danny. And I think we're at time, but thank you everybody for coming. Thank you to the Reuben Mark Initiative, to all the organizers of the event, and thank you again very much, Danny.